There were definitely times when I was involved in encounters and then releasing them back out to the defilement of the Playa was heart-wrenching because you don't know what they're going to choose. But it wasn't our job. We just made the deposit that we were able to make and give them into God's hands.
Hey, and thank you for joining me for my very special 2-year anniversary episode. It's been an amazing year with some of my biggest guests ever, including Pastor Doug Wilson, Laser Hoddle, and Feminine Not Feminist. Thank you so much for being a part of it. But this episode is really special. It's sort of a dream come true, because my guests this week aren't famous authors, pastors, or content creators. They're everyday people, but ones who have had an incredible impact on my life. Their names are Rob, Katie, Barb, and Andrea, and they're from Camp Spiritream, who introduced me to Christ at Burning Man. So please enjoy this very special 2-year anniversary episode. And once again, thank you so much for being part of the Renaissance of Men. Katie, Rob, Barb, and Andrea from Spiritream, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
You guys have made such a huge difference in my life. And I think everyone who listens to the podcast, listen to my podcast, and has heard me on other podcasts, has heard me tell the story of how I met you at Burning Man and the impact you've had on my life. So I'm really grateful that you're taking the time to talk with me today and to share some of the stories, in the background that even I don't know.
We're glad to be here.
Yeah.
So let's start by allowing you guys to introduce yourselves. So maybe Katie, we'll start with you, and we'll just go across, and you can share as much about yourself and your story as you'd like to, and then we'll get into the camp and all of that.
Yes, my name is Katie Mazza, and I'm married to Rob here, and I went to Burning Man for 7 years, starting in 2011, ending in 2017, and it was life-changing for me, to say the least, and a privilege to go.
Awesome. Can you share a little bit about your testimony, maybe, if you guys would be willing to do that?
Yes.
You don't have to. If you guys don't
no, that's fine.
That would be a little long.
Yeah, it would
just
be a
suggesting.
little long.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true. I know a couple of
I
them.
will say this, though. Rob started going to Burning Man before I did, and I wanted to go. I was in full support of it, but I did not have a release to go until 2011 because I needed to face some issues in my own life that would have hindered my ability to function in the team the way I needed to, as well as to give to the people that came to see us is in the way that would be beneficial.
Yeah. See, there's a pretty amazing insight right there. Like, you have to be spiritually prepared to go out to do ministry like that, which is, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
Rob?
And my name is Rob Mazza, and I am married to this lovely woman. And I think what I like to say, I guess I was part of the original 7 that went by invitation of an intercessory group from the Midwest. What are they? Yeah, International House of Prayer, Mike Bickle's group. And so their job was just to pray, and then they found out about us and basically extended an invitation to a bunch of crazy people that would do dream interpretation or spiritual encounters or whatever. So 7 of us went in the early years. That would be starting 2004. And those were the plowing in strange and difficult soil years, trying to figure out the culture and having the culture figure out us. And I'm really happy to say God came through, and we're all in one piece. So,
yeah.
I'm very happy to say that too.
Yeah.
Had some close calls, but we made it.
We made it.
Yeah.
Oh, I would like to hear about some of those, but
Yeah.
Barb, go ahead.
Yep. My name's Barb Owens, and I was the newest to the team. My first year was 2012, and Andrea and another friend of ours had extended an invitation for me to be on the team. By the time I came around, there were some real good protocols in place for who was allowed to go out with the team, and just kind of a screening process to make sure that the people who went out there would do well and not get chewed up and spit out by what was happening out there. So Andrea was actually my sponsor, and I had a lot of great reasons why it wasn't the right year for me to go. And then God got a hold of me and really dealt with the real issues, which was lack of faith. And I remember one of my favorite things, I remember telling Rob, like, I feel like, what do I have to offer out there? And I remember him saying, I find the soccer moms do really well out there. And I'm like, I can do that. I can go out there and be a mom and love on the people that God brings into our camp. So that was kind of what it looked like. And I actually went for 6 years. We all actually retired in 2017. It was the same year that we all felt the nudge that it was our last time going out there.
Yeah. Well, was that the year that the man ran into the fire? Did you guys hear about that?
It was.
Oh,
It was
that
the same year. It was.
Wow.
But you guys always left on, you guys always packed up and were out by Saturday. Like you didn't stick around for the burn.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things they learned in the early years was that by the time it got to that point, we were done.
Yeah.
Our team was done with what we were there for.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that you said that there were protocols in place, that, there were processes and there's a formal structure. It wasn't like you were just going out there to hang out and maybe do some ministry work. Like it was a whole thing. I don't want to say it was like a business, because it wasn't a business, like in a commercial sense, but it was there was formal processes in place for your benefit to run the camp, and everything. It was a very serious thing.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. For our protection. Really.
Yeah.
Exactly.
In spite of our jovial appearance, we were serious as a heart attack.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that came across.
Yeah.
Andrea?
Yeah, my name's Andrea Bareither, and I started in 2007, went for about 10 years. My story is a little different than Katie's. I had never done anything like that before, ever in my life. And I grew up in church. So I was in like church world and mommy world when I got invited to go. And God made it clear that I was supposed to go, but it felt like being thrown in the deep end of the pool, and I really wasn't prepared very well. But I had to learn to swim really fast, and I went out, very green and very scared. And again, like Katie said, it was the most life-changing experience ministering out there.
Yeah.
Learned a lot.
Yeah. Hands down.
Let's talk quickly about how the camp came together, what the genesis of it was, so to speak. And then I'm actually really curious about the sort of things like the chewing up and the spitting out and the processes and the learning, because from my perspective, like I just go out to Burning Man, in a secular, progressive, new age kind of world where it's like, oh, Burning Man is a great time. But that was the last time I was there. But I would imagine going in with a completely different worldview. There's a completely different means of preparation that would be, I would have to think about that now, actually. But I'm interested to hear your side, what it's like going into quite dangerous territory. So let's talk about the origins of the camp, and then we'll get into what it was actually like for you guys going there personally and collectively.
Yeah. So 2004, as I said, John Paul Jackson, kind of our mentor of sorts, had this idea that he should send a team in there from Streams Ministries, I'm part of, and we were all a part of Streams Ministries. So he had this wild idea that he should throw a bunch of us into Burning Man. And we all looked at one another and said, but there's crazy naked people there. What are we going to do?
And confirm.
But anyways, we acquiesced because there was no way of saying no to John Paul. He was a nice guy, but when he saw something on the horizon, he would go for it, and we would just emulate that. So we ended up going, and we had a background in what we call prophetic evangelism. It was a pioneering idea where we would go on the streets and look at people and just ask God for an impression, a download on who they are, where they were going, or something. And we would just basically say something like, when I look at you, I see. Mm-hmm. And that's how we made conversations on the streets. And then we started going to New Age fairs and a few other events. But Burning Man was a total immersion. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like you can go home or go into a hotel room and decompress. You had to live and interact for a whole week. So that was a game changer. And Christianity was definitely in the low minority numbers there.
Yeah.
If at all, in some cases. So there we were. And the first year was difficult because it seemed like they were testing us. Like some people wouldn't come out of character. Some people would, we'd say, do you have a dream we could interpret? And then they'd tell us a pornographic dream. Mm-hmm. And it was just this trying to figure out this sort of testing thing. And I remember complaining to the Lord about it. And he goes, actually, I was testing you the first 2 years to see if you would understand the culture and work with me to find the keys of loving them and working with them. So that was an eye-opener for me. Like it wasn't just blaming a bunch of crazy people stressing us out. It was far different. It was God's plan to get us in the mode of really listening and hearing with our heart, both them and the God that we had to lean on every stinking moment we were there. So that was the big takeaway. And but there were bright spots that even though the first 2 years were kind of like, what was that? We would have these encounters. And here's one, I'll just share one. There was a woman I was working with, and I think I gave her an encouraging word, something to do with her makeup, how God understood her makeup. And
her composition as a being.
Yeah.
Not her makeup.
Yeah.
Burning Man, you never know the difference.
People are made up there.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're not making this up. Anyway, so we're going. So she kind of looks at me like, well, that's all well and good, but then she just goes for the artery, and she just basically looks at me and she says, how come you Christians just think you can speak a scripture and it's supposed to change us? And I'm going, oh my God, here we are, ground zero. And you know what they really wanted was an encounter with Jesus living in us. Look in our eyes and see Jesus, kind of thing. And we didn't fully realize that to the degree we do now. But what I ended up saying to her is, I need to apologize to you, I said to her. And I said, I need to apologize on behalf of the church for judging you in what we deem is your strange appearance or strange behavior. And we've missed your hunger. God never misses your hunger. And I kind of lived off that little experience for quite a while as a ground zero feeling in those early years, is not to miss the hunger of the culture. In spite of their weird acting out or whatever weird channels they might get in for spirituality, it didn't matter. God was concerned about this hunger that he put in the human heart. So.
That they were seeking to fill at that festival, but with not the right food, let's say.
Yeah,
exactly. Just like you.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
It was one of the things that impressed me really early on in one of my early years was how someone could come in and they'd obviously been pursuing in dark streams, and yet there was this almost like clean feeling on them. And it was what I came to recognize was a genuine hunger for truth. And they were looking in places where they weren't finding it. But the purity of the pursuit was there, and it was obvious. When we'd meet people like that, it didn't matter what they looked like on the outside. We could tell that there was something really genuine and true there.
Now, did you announce early on that you were Christians or advertise it at all? Or it just kind of came out naturally in conversation?
No, we, if you look back in the Bible, it's kind of like Jesus he wouldn't fess up that he was the Son of God. He wouldn't fess up to all the attributes that he carried. It's just, certain instances he would reveal something, and then that famous line he said that Peter answered, goes, "Who do you say I am?" He says to his own disciples.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of ways we let them figure out by the presence we carried, the peace that was in the tent, the light, and they would verbalize these things. They would come to the entrance of our tent and say, "There's so much light here,"
Mm-hmm.
or "There's so much spirit here," or "There's so much peace here. How do you do that?" And talk about, a conversation opener for us to work with that. It was rich.
We took sort of a taste and see approach, because we understand that people in the culture come preloaded with a whole lot of ideas and judgments about Christians and who they are. Yeah. So you don't want to come straight out with that and hit that wall with people. So we're a taste and see, we let them taste of what we had and let the Holy Spirit decide when it was time to reveal who we really were.
Yeah.
I think the Apostle Paul said it well in Acts 26:17. He was talking to Agrippa, a pagan king, and he's given a defense sort of to save his life, maybe a defense of who he was, what he was doing. And basically he said, "Let me tell you my story." And so he tells him the story how a great light came, it was knocked to the ground, and then a voice came, and it was Jesus. And Jesus says, "Why are you persecuting me?" But then Jesus gives him a commission, and he says, "I'm sending you to the Gentiles." And I think this is what we've embraced, to do this, to open their eyes, and then to turn them from darkness to light, right? So it's, as Andrea was saying, we're doing eye-opening things. And it's different according, each person was a little different, right?
Yeah, I don't think a message of sin and repentance would go over so well at Burning Man, right? But I mean, but the message of love, because I remember being in the camp, and you may have heard me say this, or I may have said it to you guys. I've definitely said it when speaking about the experiences. I'm in this, I don't know what, healing encounter with you guys for 3.5 hours, something like that. And while that's going on, Barb and Katie, you were there. I'm looking around the tent, like trying to figure out, who are these people? Because I didn't see any Buddhas or Vishnus or psychedelic art or anything like that, which is pretty, as you know, pretty usual for Burning Man. You walk into someone's camp and you get a sense, like, are they, DMT, drug trippies, or are they, some sort of like New Eastern mysticism, whatever. And I didn't see any of that. And that was really odd for me, because I couldn't quite triangulate who you guys were, right? And it was only the reveal at the end. It's like, wait, what? What are you doing here? Right? And so that was consciously chosen. I mean, it would have to be, right?
Yeah. Well, and it was a really beautiful thing too, to see people experience who Jesus really is.
Yeah.
They have their misconceptions, but to let them experience it firsthand, it rocked them. And it would, rock me in the encounters, to watch them having this encounter for the first time with the true Jesus, with the true God who created them.
Yeah. And then of course I came up to visit you guys for Christmas a few months later. Thank you for hosting me, by the way. And that visit was probably as powerful as meeting you on the Playa, because I got to see that it wasn't just, you just wear this out on the Playa for work, let's say. It's like, no, you live in this way that I'd never encountered other Christians living. And especially in your interactions with each other and seeing your lives and the way you treated me, even off the Playa.
We try.
As it should be.
Yes, as it should be.
Yeah.
I agree. So how did the camp then, from its early days, start to grow? And when did you get a sense like, okay, maybe we should be doing this for more than a couple years? Maybe we should start pulling together people from across the country and make it into like a thing. And what did it look like in those early days? Like if there was just 7 of you, you probably didn't have a big tent all set up, or maybe you did. I don't know. What did it actually look like? And then how did it grow from there?
We had those chintzy pop-up things you could buy for, I don't know, maybe $100 a pop. And the wind promptly blew them to shreds the first year. But
Go figure.
This is where we learned about Burning Man community. We were out. We're a day camp, so that meant we would minister just to the point of exhaustion during the day, but at night we would go out and look at the sights and the art and whatnot. But the wind picked up, ferocious winds and dust out there. And we came back and all our neighbors were holding our tent poles down and helping us. And, the community is valued and prized there. So, we're taking notes all the time. Like, these people are serious about their neighbors, feeding one another or taking care of something. So from there, I think there wasn't a time that we said we're not coming back from the first time, even though it may have been some difficult testing. There was enough to say there's promise here. There are people worth coming back for. So there was never a time we thought we were going to quit. The next year, I think it at least doubled, more than doubled. And then by the third year, it was up to maybe 27 members.
I thought that was my first year. It was actually 50. 2007.
So 4, 5, 6. Fourth year, it really went crazy. But it was kind of like we had to play with how we would bring in new people, and we were a little fast and loose at time. But then we developed a protocol that you had to sponsor someone. Someone would vouch for the person they're bringing in and have some accountability. Because it's
you had to have the measure of character, and the heart, the right heart, and that's pretty much it.
And actually, there was a little formal thing about taking the Art of Hearing God class from Stream's ministry, because that covered character being more important than gifting. And character would also include, we would include it now, maybe a little broader umbrella of, do they love well? Do they understand honor? Do they understand protocol? So all those things became very important to us. So this Art of Hearing God class is a 21-hour class that just hits all the raw spots about our humanity sometimes. So
go ahead, Kate.
And going back to the beginning, when Rob went that first year, the first couple of years, as he had said, the IHOP people had invited the team to join them. And at that time, that team just handed out water bottles. And back then it was bottles of water to passersby and would, mostly do that. And then these guys show up and the scene begins to change. The whole thing begins to change. And those people then handed it over to the Spiritream team, and they no longer participated in a physical way. And so from that, it went to not just handing out water, but getting the encounter tent. And then there was the process of adding the coffee dome, and there's storyline in that as well. But it kind of evolved one, piece by piece.
I totally forgot about the coffee dome.
Yeah. That's like, if there are touch points, the first point are the people that give out water and just talk to people. And then we have a coffee dome where if you went in there, there'd be a chill space. There'd be people to, there's space to talk a little deeper, or a quiet space. And enjoy your coffee. Some people would spend all day in our coffee dome. And then kind of the deep end would be the encounter tent, a 90-foot military tent where we would seat. We would have maybe 10 groups of 2 or 3 of our team that would encounter people such as yourself as they came in.
Let me do the screen share real quick, and because you sent me some photos of the encounter tent, and I can pull that up right now, and we can take a look for the people watching on YouTube. They can actually see the encounter tent. Can you guys see that? Yep, that's the tent. And you can, and like I was saying earlier, you can kind of look around and there's nothing, what is that, like a galaxy or an eyeball painting or something like that. But there's nothing in there that's like, there's nothing in there that's psychedelic or anything like that. It was very, very plain, I guess you would say, by contrast, but like that doesn't mean it was ordinary in any way. And so I think, I'm not sure which end of the tent I was at, but I remember being at one end of the tent.
Yeah. By about that time, our decor was becoming early Ezekiel.
Okay, so there's probably a bunch of things that you're going to have to unpack for a lot of people listening, including me. So let's unpack John Paul Jackson, Streams Ministries, and Art of Hearing God, and then let's like unpack these things, just because there's this context that I think a lot of listeners, even if they're Christians, won't really have a lot of context for. Like, who is John Paul Jackson? What is Streams Ministry? What did he think about what you were doing in the whole thing? So let's maybe back up for a second and talk about that.
Art.
Where to begin, right?
Yeah, where to begin? Well, John Paul is now passed away, but Streams Ministry lives on with a new man in charge, John Thomas. But so John Paul was a teacher and what we would call a revelatory minister. He operated in the gift of the prophetic, and in my opinion, he was one of the more principled and a man who walked in character, which is why I was attracted to him. There was nothing flighty about it, and he could unpack the meanings of what it is to live a prophetic lifestyle, or just that everybody has gifts. You just got to realize everyone has gifts. They're given from God, but they need to be developed, and they need to be developed alongside character. And that was his biggest message. He would say that over and over again. So it's still alive today. I still teach those courses. There are Streams teachers that teach the courses. Understanding Dreams and Visions is another very popular and needed course, because all of humanity gets dreams.
Yeah.
And there are few people that could interpret it with a Hebraic or a biblical background. And so we teach that. Yeah, it's possible to do that. It's a long learning curve, but it's worth pursuing. Yeah.
That was one of the things that I think initially attracted me to going through your tent, is because I had done dream interpretation on my own after just a little bit of training in Jungian style dream interpretation like 15 years earlier. So when I came out to the Playa, and the guy that I met said, "Oh, I just came from Spirit Dream. They do dream interpretation and healing." I'm like, probably it was dream interpretation that hooked me. That was something I could kind of understand. Like, oh, that sounds cool. I'll go check that out.
Yeah.
I still have my
Art of Hearing. Want to talk about our menu board? We had a menu.
Yeah, please.
Board,
do you have it with you?
Menu board.
Well, that was kind of your domain up front.
Well, yeah, okay. I don't want to do all the talking, but we did. We had a sandwich board. It was kind of like, I had this idea like, well, we're like a spiritual cafe, so we need a menu board so they can see what they want. And it was just a kind of a cheap way to hook people, but it works. We had dream interpretation. We had encouraging words. We had healing. Help me with
healing touch.
Healing touch.
Destiny direction.
Okay.
Destiny direction. And then we had spiritual encounter, which became such a popular one. We started calling it free fall. We thought of metaphors for everything. But essentially, there are real spiritual experiences that we could back up in the Bible, but we didn't want to use religious language.
Yes.
So, and we know the culture is hardwired for healing, inner healing, physical healing, all kinds of stuff. So, the combination of, let me back up. We know that the human spirit, we all have a human spirit, and it's hardwired to look for God in some measure. Pre-salvation, it's kind of dim, but it's still looking, because he put eternity in the heart of man. Eternity is not an earthly component. It has to come from God. So we know that people have their radar up. And so they're comparing our methodologies of healing or encouragement to theirs. and the kind of ambiance, the light around us, the feel, the atmosphere, the peace. And that's what worked. You know, they might read the menu board, but then they're in the door and they're going, oh, wow. How do you guys do that? I'd have this question like right off the bat. They'd walk through the threshold and they go, how do you guys do this? You know?
Yeah.
And I go, well, let's sit down. You know?
Yeah. I've struggled to, because I would tell people, you know, the whole story in various levels of detail, where I showed up at the tent that the guy had directed me to at my camp, and struggling to remember what was actually written on the menu board, because I want to say things because I don't remember exactly what was written there, but I want to say things that were interesting to me, but the language wasn't of any sort of like identifiable New Age Eastern mysticism kind of thing, right? There was something about it. It's like, I recognize the intention behind these things, even if I don't know what any of the practices are besides, you know, like free fall. Like if I walked up with a free fall, that sounds cool. Or dream interpretation, I know, but anything else, like, then that's, I think, the skill that you guys had developed, is how to speak in a language that the culture understands, but that isn't the culture's language. And that's very difficult to do.
We're writing that one down.
Yeah, we like that. I like that. Yeah. And the truth was, so the way the encounter tent was set up, the reason I said that was Rob's domain is because we had a waiting area at one end of the tent. So, because we had a line every day of people wanting encounters, and we could only do so many before we take a break for lunch. And then we'd have a window of time after lunch before dinner where we could only do so many. So Rob and our other leader, Darren, were in the waiting area greeting people when they came in, and they had the menu board there. So they would sit with them and they'd say, you know, what looks appealing. And the whole time they were kind of pinging in the spirit, which of the 10 encounter teams will this person fit with? Where's God directing me to seat them? So like for your encounter, well, I remember you saying you were sitting there waiting and kind of talking to them, and you were looking at the teams, which one you thought you might sit with. And you told us you saw our team as Katie and I, and then a man named Larry, and you thought, oh, I don't want to be seated with that team. It's the exact team that you got seated with.
I know.
Yeah. So that was kind of, and then, so they would kind of ping where the person belonged, and then bring the burner back and introduce them to the team members. And it was always kind of funny to me because we had our menu board, and they would always say, this is so-and-so. They'd make the introductions, and they're here for destiny direction, which we would, you know, take note of. But the fact is that Holy Spirit guided every encounter. We didn't really know where any of them were going to go. I mean, we flew by the seat of our pants with every encounter because we didn't know what really the person was bringing, what they really needed, but God knew every time. And we learned to just flow with whatever was happening in the spirit.
We had to be open to the creativity of God. Because there were things that he would download, do this. And we're like, do what? And he would take us all on an adventure.
Yeah.
And we'd have to figure it out later what just happened.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was very creative in how he reached people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had one encounter my newbie year where Andrea was the team lead and I was on her team. And I won't do all the details of the encounter, but she was doing this encounter with this woman, and I'm watching, and I was super impressed because I'm a newbie and I'm just taking it all in, right? And Andrea just navigates this whole thing with this gal, and the gal gets this, you know, incredible experience. And when she leaves at the end, Andrea looks at me and the other gal on the team. She said, well, that was different.
And I was like, that was the weirdest encounter I've ever
okay.
done.
And I said, you've never done that before?
No.
But she just flowed with it so beautifully. I'm like, wow, take notes, Barb. Andrea knows how to do this, and I need to know how to do it too. But yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Something that you said, the way you said that about the language thing, it prompted a memory of an encounter that I had maybe second or third year that I went. And I was although at the latter years that I went, I hung out mostly in the dome, but with you, that time I was in the encounter tent, thankfully. But so I was in the encounter tent, and two different days, two different teams. I was with two different teams, and two women were brought, one woman one day or that morning and one in the afternoon. And it was so interesting because each of those gals had had abortions.
Mm.
And I had that experience. Out of the whole team, the leaders, prompted by the Holy Spirit, brought those gals to the team that I was on, and Holy Spirit gave me language to be able to talk to them about principles, because they were born in an age and an era where this was natural. And if it was so natural and accepted and the way to do life, then why did they feel so crappy afterwards, after having an abortion? Why did things shift and their lives kind of fall apart? Well, as I said, Holy Spirit gave me language that they could understand and relate to, using principles about the Creator. And even though man's ways are this, Creator's ways are not. And Creator's ways and principles overrule man's ways. And so the things that we feel sometimes when we violate the principles of the Creator impact us greatly. And they could really register with that. And it opened the doors for them to get some relief and some cleansing and some healing.
I think that's one of the things that you guys did so masterfully, is you provided real healing and relief and release. And I have that painting, Andrea, that you made of Rob hugging that girl. It's around here somewhere. I don't have a digital version, but maybe it'll pop up on my desk somewhere. But that you came out and you actually offered that, and you had said earlier, Rob, about Barb coming, like soccer moms do really well out there. Like that was Barb. That was exactly what I needed, even down to the point that like I didn't have the soccer mom experience with my mom, as we've talked about, but my mom's name was also Barbara. And so that was, no coincidences there of being able to receive. And that was a powerful aspect for me, was being able to see an image of the mother that I didn't have. Right. And be like, wait, this is a thing. Right. And to the point where I could see in my own life God's hand at work, putting me right where I needed to be, in the same way these girls with you, Katie, had what they needed to be able to talk with you from a position where you could relate to their experience and communicate truth in a way no one else really could.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So, as people would, how did this protocol kind of develop, like with sandwich board? And, obviously you would have had to learn on the go about how this is all going to work, getting a sense of like, well, we should just trust ourselves, trust the Spirit to guide us in the right way, flying by the seat of your pants in these healing encounters and not going by any set playbook that all developed over the years, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it did. I mean, Andrea brought up the word creativity, how creative God is. And I think we're more dialed into heaven is an extremely creative, innovative place. And there's things we haven't even near tapped into. But we were being in an extreme environment, and basically our go-to prayer was help God. We would get ideas. I mean, we would just get ideas and try them. And it was a community united in this quest. And I can't say enough about that while we had leadership and sub-leaders, I mean, it was an open dialogue of ideas. So anybody could have an idea and we'd go, yeah, that sounds like it has weight on it. Let's try it. So I don't know, maybe I came up with a menu board. I think I did. I think I had the sandwich board idea, but there's so many details to doing this kind of outreach, and everything became an art form, the serving of food and inviting of guests and who to invite, and the kind of music we chose. Katie would come up with a playlist every year of basically kind of secular songs that were edging into values that we appreciated, you know what I mean? And then we can work with that, so.
When you open yourself up to the creativity of God and doing things differently, one idea leads, all of a sudden you have two ideas, and then those two ideas, you have four ideas, and you have those four ideas, and you have 8 ideas, and it just mushrooms, and it's just limitless, the creativity and the ideas that can come. And then when you open that sphere up for God to do whatever he wants to do on that platform of creativity, it's mind blowing.
Yeah. There were times when we would have the nudge to do something in an encounter that we didn't have the theology for, but we knew it was the Spirit telling us. But every time we'd go back to scripture, because that was always our plumb line, and we'd find the principle. Because it was not about going outside of the lines to the point where you're violating God's principles ever. But there were definitely times by the Spirit when we knew what we were to do. And then we would have conversations later. Hey, this happened. Somebody help me unpack this. And that was part of the value of team, is having the spiritual insight to be able to bounce off of each other and make sure that we were staying lined up with God's principles.
And I think that's really important. And I'm grateful to hear you say that, because I know from the encounter, meeting you guys and getting to spend a lot of time with you guys in Idaho and getting to know you personally, but I've never really asked too many questions about the protocols and practices and the discipline that's involved to do something like that and still hold to your principles, still hold to your personal integrity. Not any of you would ever lose that, but you're being pulled in all these different energetic directions, if nothing else, and if only by the overall feeling of the event. I mean, I've been unable to speak to the amount of discipline that must have gone on behind the scenes to support you collectively and individually in the conduct of that. And maybe you can speak into some of those things, because, it's like deep sea diving. Like, you don't just go swimming down there. Like, you have to build the suits and underwater, whatever. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Well, let's talk about one thing that became a bit central to what we did, was a father or a mother blessing. And it's something I was doing quite a bit before. I would stand in place for the absent father or the abusive father, and sometimes apologize, or sometimes, just say, I'm not actually your father, but I believe I understand Father God enough to impart something to you. So you have to be very intimate with people. You have to hold them close, and you have to deal in your mind that this physical intimacy is just a by the by. I'm looking to reach their soul, their broken soul, and their spirit that's just aching to be validated by a simple "I love you," "I bless you." And to do that, you have to be absolutely clear in your mind, like, no, I'm not going into any, even though that physical proximity is there, I'm not going to go into any fantasy, about this. There was one significant time, I'll just tell a brief story. It was near the end of the week. We would have what we called popcorn encounters. They were very quick because we had such an overflow of people that we couldn't get to during the week. So we'd have people hanging out on Friday going, when is it my turn? So we herded them into the tent, and we told our team, pair up, do 10 minutes worth. So I'm kind of standing there watching, kind of directing a little bit, but mostly just watching. And they coming. A couple of my teammates.
It was me.
It was you. That's right.
It was me.
Yeah.
I'll give the background, and then you take your side of it. So I was teamed up with one of our Swedish teammates, Malin, and this young man came to us, and he said that he was struggling with whether or not he was homosexual. But he said every time he had a homosexual encounter, it felt wrong, but yet he was so drawn to men. And right away, we knew what he was looking for was a father. He was thinking he was homosexual, but what he was wanting was a touch of a father. So we said, hey, Rob, and brought him over and told Rob, and then Rob took it from there. And
so taking it from there, but I'll just throw just a little tidbit here. Jesus came to reveal the Father. Because, he even placed himself under that to reveal the Father. And so we take this really seriously, that there must be a crying need in humanity for a father. And we know that to be absolutely true now.
Yeah.
So there I am standing with a short man that's very sincere, very broken. And you know, basically I go, are you ready for this? I just give him a little spiel. I'm just going to hold you like a dad and speak this blessing. And I bless them from conception. And because God's original design was not that they go astray, but they know his spirit from the beginning. You know, so I just take them through kind of stages in life and bless them and confirm love upon them and bless their design and their destiny, bless their bodies, bless their souls, bless their spirits the way God intended. So somewhere in the middle of it, I mean, this is where God really turned the tables on me. I do this almost with, you know, just by the by, in a sense. Not that I'm not involved, but I know how to control. You know, it gets very emotional for two of us sometimes. But this one, God took me in this different place of almost like, as Ezekiel said, I sat where they sat. I understood his pain to such a degree. I wept his tears. Well, as weird as that sounds, I wept his tears while I'm holding him. And I actually had this strange thought while I'm there, many strange thoughts. I'm like, God, this is crazy. It gets crazier all the time, but you know, we're just both sinners being smiled upon by a God of great grace and great love. I have somehow merged with this massive humanity that's broken. And it still chokes me up even today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, and then the Lord just took me on a little prophetic journey where he's telescoping out from here. He goes, this is the effects of this kind of thing, that people that embrace this, we will meet the culture just the way they are, the way Jesus did. And I could see it telescoping out for generations. This is God's way. It was just a profound experience.
That painting's actually hanging on the wall. Should I grab it?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Please.
The original's here.
Yeah, because I've got I found I don't have it on my desk anymore. I actually put it up on my wall behind me, but it's your version will be much better than the card.
Yeah.
That little printout that you gave me, that went around the world with me, by the way. So
Nice.
Nice.
Oh, it's so lovely. So lovely. Yeah. And that was the spirit of everything that you did. Right. And that came across.
Yeah.
And you know, Andrea, what's so beautiful about that painting that you capture is how impersonal isn't the word, but like it's personal, but it's transpersonal. It's larger than personal. What's going on there? You know, it's like she is being embraced by something so much larger than Rob through Rob, right? And Rob as well. And you really captured that.
Yeah.
And that was a young lady from well, I don't know. She just came in the tent, and her story was her dad passed away when she's 2 years old. And she had this vague memory of her dad, and there was an ache in her heart. Yeah. It was filling an ache in her heart. And it really impacted her. To the point where we sent her a copy of that print. Yeah. And she showed it to her family, and her family's been praying for her, you know, this whole family. And they were like astounded at how God met her in a different sort of way, you know. So,
I think
I'll just add something else germane to our encounters. Burning Man changed us as much as it changed every single person that came in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We did not know God could be that big, or that good, or that creative, or that anything, name the blank that fits in with the characteristics of God. We did not know until we went over the edge and said yes to this crazy event. And so to me, God reveals himself, greater grace, the greater level of areas of sin. There's great grace available.
Yeah.
But I think there's few of us, I'll just address the Christians in the audience. There's few of us that have this yes of, I'll go there. Just my only parachute is God.
Yeah. I remember I remember being told my first year that we didn't go out there with an agenda. And I remember thinking, you guys are full of it. I'm like, of course we do. We're going out there to, save people, Well, it took me, I don't know, a year or two when I finally really understood Jesus died for all humanity, most of whom won't acknowledge what he did for them. What we were called to do when going out there was to just love on people in his name with no agenda, with no needed outcome from it other than to offer the gift of the love of God in whatever form that took. And then it was God's job then to take the deposit we'd made and do with it whatever was going to happen. It really released off of me any need for, it's not about that. It's not about having to get to the point of salvation or anything like that. I was out there really just giving out of the gifts that he'd given me personally, and allowing God's love to just flow to these people and to bring healing and the touch of whatever it looked like. And it is a paradigm shifting experience to lay down all agenda and to step into that river of the love of God and just allow yourself to be swept with it and to do whatever comes out of that place. That was, I think, for me, the thing that changed me the most. You asked about what protocols we had. I had to do, my process was like battening down the hatches. There were a lot of things that I was allowed to do, so to speak, or that I did, books I read, things I watched, whatever, until I became part of the Burning Man team. When, God would say, you can't do those things because you didn't even realize the doors it was leaving open. So my process of battening down the hatches and submitting to discipline in some of these areas, but the reward of being part of that and getting to experience the love of God like that was just, there's just nothing like it. You're just never the same again after you really just dive in with everything into that flow of God's love.
Yeah.
I just want to validate what you said about submitting and really trusting, because, I came out there and we had such a meaningful experience. Then I came to visit you guys and celebrated Christmas with you and ate bear and drank wine and listened to music and then but you guys, even though we became close friends and kept in touch while I was traveling, you had to wait 5 years for me to come around.
Yeah,
literally 5 years, like Labor Day weekend 2015 is when we met, and then I flew up to Coeur d'Alene and get baptized I didn't fly up there for that, I came up to visit, but but 5 years later, and there was never a point during that time where I ever felt any pressure or any need or any pull or anything like that. You just loved me for 5 years while I traveled around the world doing the craziest things. And then I found out later behind the scenes, you guys were praying for me, like, oh, yeah. What is he doing?
Oh no.
But that's a real testament, to everything that you're saying, that just to be so open-handed about it when that can be so difficult. Like my church does ministry at abortion clinics here in Phoenix, has a nationwide and almost international now ministry for that, and then also with Mormon temples, and they're very open about, like, no, you're not actually the one that does anything. The Holy Spirit, you allow the Holy Spirit to work through you and don't personalize it. And so I relate very much to that. But then to see that, to be able to vouch for it 1,000%, that I never felt anything other than just, pure love from you guys, and how powerful and how challenging that must have been for you to want so much for the people that you give to, including me, but not just me, but then having to be like, put it in God's hands.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love is patient, right?
Yeah.
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 I read that somewhere.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. There were definitely times when I was involved in encounters, and then releasing them back out to the defilement of the Playa was heart-wrenching, because you don't know what they're going to choose. But it wasn't our job. We just made the deposit that we were able to make and get them into God's hands.
Yeah. God is bigger than previously thought.
Oh yeah.
Well, you said a really important word there. You said defilement of the Playa, and that's that is strong, proper Christian language for what's going on, right? Because I think when I tell people, like, I met Christ at Burning Man, or he introduced himself to me, or however the phrase I use, it's that the people who know about Burning Man, even the gauziest, friendliest videos on YouTube, show hedonism and maybe not full on debauchery, but it's definitely, we'll call it a very open culture, right? But viewed through, of course, through the secular lens, it's this Shangri-La kind of experience, which we'll get back to, but viewed through a Christian lens, as much pain as there is, that's very real about being there is a lot of sin. And it's hard to, it's impossible to avoid that. And so when you say batten down the hatches, like, yeah, it's all around you everywhere. And as much as people really are concerned about their neighbors, your neighbors might have the orgy camp or whatever, right? They'll hold down your tents in a wind, but in their tents,
they might be naked while they're doing it.
Exactly. Oh, hello there.
What's really funny about that is the power and goodness of God, because we would never address their nakedness as they entered into the encounter tent to sit with us. We just said, well, that's God's domain. We're not here to judge their dress or lack of it. But so we get a lot of practice making eye contact. We're really good at it. But, they would sit down, and this happened so many times. Suddenly they'd be looking for a covering for their nakedness. And we hadn't said a word, they'd be looking for a scarf or a shirt or something. And it would just kind of amuse us how God would work in that area. Conviction's still alive, no matter how much they try to wall it up. Conviction is still be alive. So I want to give a shout out to Darren Zinn, who's the present leader, but also Lisa Machek, who co-led with me for several years, and Reese Saunders and Scott Evelyn, who were the early guys from Streams that did it. I mean, they laid some serious tracks for us to grow. The other thing I wanted to say, you talked about protocols. There was actually a real nuts and bolts protocol thing that we learned from the Native American people. When we first came to Reno, a small church hosted us. And as part of that church, there were a Native American couple and their son-in-law and their daughter. And they came up to us and said, "Do you want to do protocol tonight?" So they did this very formal Native American protocol where they danced. We did a friendship dance. They spoke blessing over us. They gave us gifts. They welcomed us into the land. And we thought that was spiritual. These Native American believers, that blew our minds a bit. And then they waited. And so we went to dinner with them, and they kind of waited for us to feedback. And so basically we were saying different forms of what was that. And so the answer came back from Dan Mosley, who was leading the group. And he said, basically we did it backwards. When you enter a stranger's land or a tribe's land, you are supposed to introduce yourself and ask permission to enter the land. These are the old ways. And then bring a gift. We would have a gift exchange. And so after that, for about 4 years, they brought us around to about 4 different tribes. And we would meet the chief or the tribal chairman and maybe some members of the governing body or whatever. And we would buy a Pendleton blanket, and we do a very formal presentation. And we would ask them for permission to enter the land and the reason we are doing it is in order to speak the message of Jesus. And whether they were saved, pre-saved, didn't matter. They recognized you are doing the old ways of honor. And in fact, they're God's ways. You're not just assuming you have the right to come into an area now. You're doing the old ways, and we would get the blessing every time. And we credit that with putting a whole different level of blessing on us, both as the gatekeeper people that God had there originally, and also the blessing of the land,
the Playa,
just the land in general. You know, these were ancient lands owned by the Paiute people, and so there's plenty of scriptures in the Bible about the land, how the land actually is meant to give us life, cooperate with the sons of God and such. So that's a whole nother layer. That would be another conversation.
So I wonder, so for those of you who showed up in the later years, maybe Barb or Katie, I had this image in my mind of, so you've heard about the Spiritream camp, and maybe you've seen photos, and I would still like to go through some of the photos, but you heard about the camp. And so you finally take the leap to go for the first time. And so you're in the RV or in the car or whatever, and you're actually going into the land of Burning Man. And you drive up and you're seeing like the welcome home kind of sign. You're going through the whole ritual. Like, just walk me through that moment of like, you're actually venturing into the place that you've heard about.
Well, by the time I went, of course, I had heard the stories about going into the gate, how the welcoming committee there. And so I was actually anticipating that with great delight, getting down in the Playa and doing dust angels and all that. And so it was really quite exciting. I'll tell you though, when we got the camp up and running that very first year, Rob did not go that year that I went because he took the year off. He and Lisa had handed over the leadership of the camp to Darren. And so they thought it best that for him to get off to a good start, they would stay back and allow him to run. And which is a beautiful thing, because then Lisa didn't come back, although she wanted to, but a job took her away from that. But Rob was able to come back and do that successfully. So that's another example of a transition in leadership that worked successfully in this arena, where Rob could come under Rocket and work successfully with him. But anyway, I went when Rob didn't. And so with this whole change of leadership, there was a lot of changes to the team, and I'm just coming on new. And so there was a lot of things that I didn't understand until later, nuances of changes in leadership. And I was supportive as I could be. But there was a time when I was in the coffee dome. And so that was, they were kind of putting me here and there. And so I was in the coffee dome, and they had prepped me a little bit that people would give you gifts. Maybe they'll give you stones and so on, because it's a giving culture. And be sure that you look at them and discern what you need to do with them. Do you keep them and pray over them and cleanse them, or do you throw them away, and this sort of thing? So this happened, and somebody gave me some little stones, and I felt like they were defiled, but I was new. All of this was kind of new to me, and so I went to one of the people in the leaders in the dome, and it was almost like she didn't even recognize me. She looked at those and she could feel that defilement and told me what to do, but it was almost like that defilement almost closed off who I was to her. Almost. It was really an interesting exchange, and I got rid of the stones and cleansed and all of that, but it really instructive for me. It was quite, and so that, from that experience, that one experience, and I went on and I was pretty clear about receiving gifts and what to do with them. But the initial one, that breaking the ice in that arena, so to speak, was quite, striking.
Yeah. How are you going to know, right? Like there's so much to figure out as you get on the ground about how the whole thing works, right down to the weather and the dust and the people. Like someone hands you some rocks, like that's not going to be the first thing on your mind, right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so by the time I came around, the protocols were pretty well established. So I know there was some years prior to me coming that were pretty wonky. I've heard the stories, but I started in 2012 and I just felt really covered. I mean, Andrea was my official sponsor, but I had all these guys. There was, I don't know, 8 of us or something like that went from North Idaho at the time. And so I just kind of like held onto their coattails and went along with things. And if there was anything that felt off, and that was the beauty of the structure, is my first point of contact, if I didn't understand or whatever, would be my sponsor, would have been Andrea. But I knew, because we were already doing ministry together up here. We had a dream interpretation ministry that we'd been doing already for a few years together. Our whole team, I just felt that real sense of covering, but that was kind of my grafting in. So I had a little bit of an easier on-ramp on that front. I wasn't as concerned about the spiritual aspect of it. I was more a big baby about the dust and the discomfort. And a true confession, yes, I dodged the rolling in the dust at the gate my newbie year. I was
didn't
like,
have to do it either.
I didn't want to. I'm like, I'm not doing that.
I didn't do it.
You didn't?
No.
How did you get out of it? You just say no? Deal with
I
it?
don't know. We basically lied and then repented later. We just said, we told them we were so shocked that 2 bikini clad women with skulls tattooed down their backs entering our bus, and we're looking like we came out of the 4-H club, not understanding costumes. You know, we're going, oh yeah, we're cool. We've been here before. And they just thought, you liars.
Just play it cool.
Yeah. But I had, it was a good thing going in feeling that covered. But for me, I had to be kicked out of the nest a little bit. Because I was afraid to step out and wasn't speaking up. I remember one encounter I had, and there were 3 people on the team, and it was a young woman, and I felt like she needed a mother's blessing, but I wasn't going to do it. Right. I'm a noob. I'm just learning and
pass.
So, right. So the other 2 people in the team, they gave her this encounter. At the end of it, I turned to the team lead, a woman named Deborah, and I told her, I kind of felt like this. And she said, you need to speak up more. She said, if you feel something like that, you can whisper in my ear. And that was, she'd give me the guidance so that I wouldn't derail and do something stupid. Right. Well, I was kicking myself. I was so mad at myself because I knew this girl needed the love of a mother. And I was feeling it in my heart, and I didn't extend it. And I was really upset with myself. And so I just prayed. I was like, you know what, God, I know she needs this, and I missed the boat. And anyway, I just had to entrust God with it. This is a great testimony about the synergy of the Spirit that our camp operated in. So that night at dinner, we had dinner, and then I go up to the station where we're washing our plates, and I overhear one of our other teammates, Rochelle, who actually is one of our Idaho teammates, talking about this young gal who came into the coffee dome. She'd had an encounter, and she was really undone by her encounter. And so she went into the coffee dome just to process, which was really common when people would do that a lot. Yeah. And God highlighted this gal to Rochelle, and she went over and sat with her and held her and blessed her as a mother. And I started crying right there at the dishwashing station, because it was like, God had it. God was more invested in her getting that blessing of a mother than I was. I was invited to be part of that, but God had my back and had this young gal's back. And boy, what a testimony to the synergy of the Spirit, just between the encounter tent and the coffee dome. There wasn't the communication going back and forth verbally between us, but boy, the Spirit made it known what was going on in those places, and if one needed to pick up where someone else left off. So great learning experience for me in that, and faith builder too.
Yeah. And how often did that work with the body art?
I was just going to say that
Okay,
one of the things on our menu board was inspired art. And so we had artists who had actually asked God for a prophetic picture, and they would paint that somewhere on the person's body. And then they would prophesy to them about that body art. And it would speak right into their heart, just like an arrow. And so often there was such a synergy between the different aspects of our camp, is that person then would go and have a regular encounter, like go from the coffee dome where they had body art and then go into the encounter tent. and the people didn't see their body art that just got painted, but they would have the same exact word that they were just given with the picture, and then they would show them, oh my gosh, look what they just painted on me. And vice versa, that would happen. You know, they would go to Encountered first, they'd get some incredible word, and then they'd go get body art, and she would paint exactly what the person just encountered
without knowing.
It was fantastic.
I had a great story. Actually, Katie and I were on a team together, and this was early on. And I remember you'd gotten a picture of this gal that she was like a water jug, but there was a crack. And so it was like all this stuff in her just was like leaking out. It was a pitcher, and it just kept leaking out. And so it was a healing journey that we took her on to heal this place in her heart where it was not a good leaking out. I can't remember the exact gist of it. So she goes from our encounter into the coffee dome, doesn't share what the encounter was. And Nita, the team member in there who was painting on her, painted a water pitcher on this gal's arm.
Wow.
No crack. Yeah. And not knowing what had happened. And we heard about that later, and it was like mind blown. Like,
yes. And her mind was blown.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, what?
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah.
How'd you do that? I've actually got the picture of the coffee dome here. Let me share it real quick.
Yeah.
Got a bunch of pictures actually. Here we go.
There.
That's the coffee dome, right?
Yes.
Yes.
You got the speakers and the DJ setup.
What was that?
No DJ. We just had speakers with music.
Got it.
Yes,
okay.
I created the music, the playlist, and we would just play. I had several playlists that I could play during the day, and we played that as a variety of music. We did have we had a lot of wonderful encounters in the dome, the coffee dome. One I think we all remember is there, and of course the coffee dome, we pray through it and cleanse it and so on, but still things get through. And there was one day when there's one specific area in the coffee dome that was attracting licentiousness and
naked behavior.
And kind of sensuality kind of things. And so we had to monitor all that, of course. And so we're going, there's something up here. And so one of the gals had, maybe it was Rochelle, I forget who it was. Rochelle had the sense of, we need a mom.
No. She tried all of her tricks.
Okay.
Didn't know what to do. And so she went to our kitchen lady named Amphora and said, please come help us. This is what's happening. We don't know what to do. And so Amphora goes into the dome, and she's like praying, going, God, what am I supposed to do? I don't know what to do. And as she walks into the dome, she hears the Lord say to her, children don't like to sin in front of their mothers. And so she felt like she was supposed to release a mother's blessing over that spot. And so she did that. She released a mother's blessing over that spot, and the licentiousness never happened again.
Oh, wow.
A creative solution.
Yeah.
I think this was one of the things that I remember being really struck by is, for me, spending all the time in secular, progressive, new age, whatever, mystical culture, the perception of energy is very real, right? And once I got an understanding of that, it's not something that I could ever forget or deny was a real thing, right? And so I think what you guys did so well is you had that awareness, you had that understanding, which gave you not only the ability to have spiritual insight into what was going on around you, but also to communicate with people from the culture about this phenomenon that usually gets dismissed by so many other people. That you can actually feel energy. Things can be invested with the energy of someone or something or an act or something like that. But a lot of people don't have that sense. And so for you going out to Burning Man, if you don't have that sense, you don't develop that sense, you'll be in real danger because it's real. And then also for people that are looking to communicate on that level about this way that they have of perceiving reality quite accurately, not always, but sometimes quite accurately, you can meet them on the level that they're at, especially me, to be able to understand that.
The coexisting spiritual realm is very real in both kingdoms.
Say more about that. Unpack.
Yeah.
Yes. And
yeah. Well, you know, and I prefer to, excuse me, put the weight on the kingdom of light, God's kingdom.
Yeah.
Because we all know too well how people get afraid of curses and things that Satanists and witches might do. But listen, in God's kingdom, a curse causeless shall not come. You know, scripture shall not land, you know, unless there is a cause. But we have the out of repentance, you know. And we also know that who's given us all authority over all works of the enemy, you know, so we don't have to be subject to that. We can change the atmosphere. We can change the curses on ground, but we could also change the curses over people. And we don't have to live with that stuff. And when there's an intentionality of 35 people on a team and a big yes, in other words, we're agreed in faith. We just have this big yes, it's easier to operate that way. You know, we're not wading through a mass of unbelief. One of the unfortunate things about many of our Christian circles is there's a lot of unbelief as to what God can do or who he is.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to wade through a wall of unbelief. And Jesus, you know, there's several times when he had to take out the people that didn't believe with, I think it was his mother-in-law, to heal the mother-in-law, and said, you people leave. You're interfering with the ability to heal. And then there were whole cities that Jesus couldn't go because they did not, their unbelief was so strong. And, you know, if your unbelief is really strong, then you must be believing in something else, like fear.
Right.
So that's not good.
Right.
Peter's mother-in-law.
Peter's mother-in-law. I'm
Not
sorry.
Jesus's mother-in-law.
Did I say
I was going to ask. I was like, do I say? Nah, that's fine.
Yeah.
They've got it.
Yeah. Boy, that's bad theology.
Yeah.
I don't remember which book that was in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hezekiah 14:29. Yeah. Anyways, we just know that it's our privilege and joy to change, call it change. That sounds strange, but change the atmosphere. You know, if it's dark, we come to bring light. In fact, we are the light of the world, just our presence. When we personalize that and be very intentional, because Jesus said it, you're the light of the world.
Yeah.
What does that mean? That means you are radiating something that changes the land, the atmosphere, the people around you.
We were also very intentional about creating the atmosphere within our camp where the presence of God would be the fullest. And that's also part of the story of, you know, the progression of things is the art, because Burning Man is an art festival. And the first few years I went, we were, you know, the ladies in the camp were just decorating the tent with some pretty fabrics and, you know, just kind of throwing it together. But God put it on my heart about my third year to be more intentional and create something specific. And he put it on my heart to do a tree of life. And so he gave me the download of how to do that, how to create this tree of life with these, you know, branches and leaves hanging down and everything. And it absolutely transformed the atmosphere that was in that encounter tent. Just like when God gave specific directions with his tabernacle or his temple, he had all kinds of specific art he wanted created in there. And then it was a place for him to dwell. And when you go through that intentionality to partner with God, with his creativity, what do you want to release in this space artistically, then his presence comes and it just transforms. We call it atmosphere design. And by the time you came along, we had done the Tree of Life for 4 years, and God gave us a new theme, which was the visions of Ezekiel. So you came into whirlwinds and rainbows and creatures with eyes all around, and a lot of strange images.
Wheels within wheels.
Wheels within wheels. Yeah.
That was what I needed to see. Say more, because you had mentioned early Ezekiel earlier in the conversation.
Early Ezekiel.
Yeah. And you know, what if the very images from the Bible that God tells us to do, what if there's a whole power and ability to shift directions or motion? There's a lot of motion in, you know, this is just to get people thinking, you know, what if? Because again, that coexisting spiritual realm is because the veil is rent and we have access to the heavenly realm of God, these things become more real to us. It's more than fabric and color.
Yeah.
You had an encounter with that face of Jesus.
Yes.
I did. Yeah. Like wearing goggles.
Yes.
Yes, he did.
That's the wild part, because I tell the story, and it would be easy to dismiss what I saw if it was just a face from a painting. Like thoughts can be transferred between people, right? Like you could be standing behind me, Katie. I remember you had your hands on either side of my head, and you could be concentrating on the face of Jesus, and maybe I'd pick up on it, right? Like a carbon copy, but that wasn't what it was. It's like a man walked up to me wearing goggles, like wearing Burning Man goggles to protect himself from the dust. Like, what do you even, I don't know, what do I even do with that? Like,
Love it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was part of like the four faces. That was part of what Ezekiel saw. That was part of your decorative shift, let's say.
Yeah, it was the living creatures with the faces. So the face of an ox, the face of a lion, the face of an eagle, and the face of a man. And, it doesn't say in there that the face of a man is the face of Jesus, but I decided when I painted that to use Akiana's painting of Jesus as my model. And it was just a sketch. It wasn't like a full painting. It was just a sketch of a man's face. But you're not the only one that recognized it as Jesus. There was another woman that came to my encounter group one day, and she wanted deliverance. She plain out said, "I have 2 demons. Can you get rid of them?" We said, "Oh yeah,
Yes.
we can do that. If we're going to do that, I need to use the name Jesus. Is that okay with you?" And she said, "Oh yes. I recognized him when I came in. I saw him on that thing over there." I'm like, wow. I never said that was Jesus.
It was apparent. Yeah, I could kind of tell it was Jesus, but I still remember, Katie, I asked you because I wanted
you asked me, is that Jesus?
I knew it, but I was like, okay, I don't want to walk out of this moment. This is the thought that was going through my head, is I don't want to walk out of this moment and then later be like, okay, maybe that was some guy who was the founder of the camp or something like that. Some human, some other person, right? So I wanted to make sure. So that's why I asked.
Yeah.
But
Do you have that picture, Will, in the lineup of pictures? Do you have that picture of you in front of the face of Jesus, that banner?
Oh yeah, I'll pull it up right now. Let's see.
Whoever had the camera got some great pictures.
Yes.
Oh man, well, let's go through. Yeah, so this one, right? This one of me on my knees.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And you can see the dirt on top of my head because I bowed my head down, and you can see the dust on my feet and everything.
Yeah. And then when I took the picture with you, which I can see there also, I asked if you wanted to wipe, because I said, "Oh, you've got some Playa dust," and you said, "No, I want to leave it there."
Yeah.
The one right
one.
above there. Yeah.
This one.
Yeah, you can see it on your face. Yeah.
No, I don't want. And the gifts that you guys gave, the necklaces I'm wearing.
Yeah.
You guys made those for the people who came, and you also gave me a Playa name. I'd been 3 times and I hadn't been given one before.
Yeah.
Oh, what was it?
Oak.
What was it?
Oak. Yeah.
Because you were like a strong oak. Yes.
I was definitely a different version of myself back then as well, which I think you'd probably see in the photo.
Oh yeah. Totally.
Very different.
Completely different.
And then so this, and you've got this photo here. What's this? This is Barb. This is you with somebody.
Yeah.
At home with mother's blessings.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
Loving on a burner.
And so so here's you have some photos of Burning Man. This is what there's the man. I don't know what year that would have been, but the man was still on the ground. So I guess it was probably 2000s somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
And then there's the man again.
Oh, that was the Da Vinci's.
That's Da
one.
Vinci's.
Yeah.
Da Vinci's workshop. Right?
Da Vinci's workshop. Yep.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, I think for people who haven't been before, like there's a lot of infrastructure that goes into Burning Man. And one of the things that I wanted to say earlier was that, if you were doing ministry at a place like North Korea or China, like those countries, and the cities in them, they're fixed in place and they don't go anywhere. Beijing's not going anywhere, right? You can go there and it's consistent from year to year, day to day, hour to hour. But Burning Man really only exists for the public for 1 week out of the year, and it's constantly changing, and it's very much while there are a lot of principles that stay the same, it's also a moving target, right? To be able to, so when we talk about going into the culture, like, yes, there are consistent aspects of the culture that are durable from year to year, but at the same time, every year you went in, I imagine you went into somewhat very different environments, especially as it grew. Like if you were there from 2004 to 2016, I went in 2003, so I know what it was like back then. And then I came back in 2013 and I met you in 2015. But that 10-year period, like, it went through inflationary growth. I remember in 2003, it was like 30,000 people. You could walk the whole festival and didn't need a bike. When I went back in 2013, forget walking anywhere. And the festival was like 60 or 80, it doubled in size. So what was that like being on the ground year over year, watching the festival grow and change and kind of become that moving target Shangri-La?
Yeah, I don't know. We were just ourselves, We didn't.
That's true.
Yeah, we just rode with it. It's like you said, if you wanted to go look at it, when it's 80,000 people, it's a lot different. Yeah.
I will say though that, I mean, as a believer who sees what sin does to people, it was very disturbing to see the growth, to see how that was spreading and the lawlessness that was being bred out there, and then also being taken from Burning Man out into the world. It's grieving.
Yeah,
that's true, because there was an intentionality too that we were aware of by the Burning Man leadership to do forums across the world and to kind of spread that sort of gospel of the gospel of Burning Man, so to speak. So
that's happening.
The weight of evil was growing.
So, okay, let's talk about that for a minute, because I remember when I went out in 2003 and the festival had kind of this Wild West kind of spirit, but there was like when I say there's a lawfulness, at least everyone's like, we don't really know what we're doing. So here's some fire and here's some plywood and here's some crazy kind of lasers and art, like, cool. Yeah, it's fun. But when I went back in 2013, it felt like the festival had, quote, gone pro, right? And then there was a solidity to it, and there was a permissiveness. There was a darker permissiveness to it. Like the Wild West has a permissiveness, but I would say it also had a sense of like experimentation within defined boundaries somehow. But then it felt like 2013 that had flipped. I don't know how to articulate it, but I did feel that the evil had grown quite significant and only continued to from 2013, 2015 up until the present day. Like, talk about that experience, because that's the discernment that I'm trying to have, is like, I don't think everything there was all bad all the time, but it certainly felt over time there was more bad more of the time as the years went on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I can say, as I've always been a very sensitive person to atmospheres, to what's in people. I'm a feeler, and so I have to say, in the 10 years I went, I grew so much. But every single year, I would enter the Playa and be, my senses were accosted by what was out there. And so, as we'd be setting up our camp, I'm like, oh God, why am I here again? And then, by the time we get rolling with the ministry, then you're refocused on why you're there again. And, and the grace of God comes over you. But yeah, you have to deal with that. Yeah.
Well, if you look at the 10 principles that Rob's got them printed out here, the 10 principles of Burning Man, I remember reading that before I went out the first time. And really, they've got some pretty altruistic principles that the event was founded upon.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening is it just degenerated into a big orgy.
Yeah.
So by the time we retired in 2017, the tide had turned to the point that even the true burners, like the people who'd been around for a long time since the beginning of it, they were having a hard time with the direction that it had gone, because they'd gotten away from this kind of radical generosity, radical community. I mean, the principles, essential core principles, are not a bad thing, but what got built upon that was just yuckier and yuckier as they just got darker and darker as the years went on.
Yeah.
It's almost as if the principles went by the wayside, and that people going really didn't consider them that much.
Yeah.
It seemed like to me it was more like, oh, we're going to Burning Man and we're going to let anything fly.
Yeah. Throw off all inhibitions and just,
Yeah.
dive into all the sin, that they
Yeah.
wouldn't do in normal
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
I remember one year there was a group of young Irish kids that had, I think they had graduated high school, whatever that is over there, and kind of were young, beginning college when a group of them came over. And one of the things that they were going to do while in the States was go to Burning Man. It's like, it had grown worldwide to that kind of let's go to Burning Man and, let experience anything and everything. And I don't think any one of them really would say they could quote any of those principles.
Yeah. It wasn't why they were there.
Yeah.
Can you read the principles real quick, just so everyone knows what they are?
You want to read?
Sure. So, radical inclusion, no stranger. God. We worked under when the first year we were there, we were with IHOP, and the leader, Randy Bolander, he was actually a pastor, and he actually befriended Larry Harvey, the founder, visionary. He befriended him. I mean, they became buds. And there was a video that came out called Pastor on the Playa. They interviewed him. And he went and said, God can work with any of these principles.
Yep.
And so the bigger thing as I read these is choice on how you do that. Do you put God at the center, or do you put your own desires at the center? So radical inclusion. Next one is gifting. We're all about God's greatest gift. We're all about gifting. Decommodification. In order to preserve the spirit of gifting, our community seeks to create social environments that are unmediated by commercial sponsorships, transactions, or advertising. And I remember in the early days, you had to even block lettering like U-Haul on a trailer. They didn't want any commercial thing at all. Radical self-reliance. Burning Man encouraged individuals to discover, exercise, and rely on their inner resources. Radical self-expression. Recognizing the unique gifts of the individual, and no one is like you, and you should have liberty to exercise that. Well, you can see where that can go off the cliff or produce beautiful art. Communal effort. Our community creates cooperation and collaboration. We strive to produce, promote, and protect social networks, public spaces, works of art, methods of communication. Civic responsibility. We value civil society. Community members who organize events should assume responsibility for public welfare. Makes sense?
I'll read that again. You broke up for just a second.
God created the planet. Yeah.
Leaving no trace was that
Leaving no
principle.
trace.
Leaving
that
no
you just read.
trace. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't listen to that one.
Participation. Yeah. Our participation is committed to radically participatory ethic. And I only wish churches were more like this.
Yeah.
All in. And then immediacy. Immediate experience is in many ways the most important touchstone of value in our culture. We seek to overcome barriers that stand between us and recognition of our inner selves, the reality of those around us, participation in society, and contact with a natural world exceeding human powers. No idea can substitute for this experience of immediacy.
Yeah, I mean, you can see
Not
how
bad.
I mean, they're good for what they are, but definitely it's easy to see how you could build anything off of that, especially the radical self-expression. Because my experience of going to Burning Man from secular culture was that at least by 2013, 2015, it had become that however you choose to express yourself is innately spiritual and therefore good. So if you want to go out there and you want to, and you can be whoever you are in the everyday life, and then you go out to Burning Man, you go quote home, right? Home was where you belong, not the 51 weeks out of the year, but that 1 week out of the year, you're home. And then you go out to Burning Man, and then if you want to walk around naked and paint yourself blue and get into orgies and do all the drugs and do all the stuff, that is your radical self-expression. Your self-expression is inherently spiritual. And if inherently spiritual, it is inherently good.
Mhm.
And that definitely grew. And even to the point where it became almost expected. Then, back in 2003, I remember you didn't have to dress up. If you did, cool. It was encouraged. But by 2013, 15, there was like a uniform. It's kind of expected that you had a furry vest. And if you're not doing that, then you're not properly participating. So it was like almost this real subtle air of shaming around like, no, you're supposed to be crazier. If you're not crazy, you're not at Burning Man. It's like, why do I got to be that? I don't want to be that way. Like I'm here for different reasons, but it almost tried to start pulling the worst out of people. And I think it succeeded in many ways.
Yeah. For an art community, who said we all have to look like a Mad Max movie?
Yeah.
Right. Steampunk, whatever.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who said that was the standard?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you guys would do your ministry work during the day, what was it like when you would go riding around at night? Like I knowing what we've talked about, that the day is full of so many protocols and so much spiritual cleansing and so much keeping of yourself safe within your own God protected space. Then you really venture into the heart of darkness in some ways. The night at Burning Man would become, you didn't stay for
where we went.
we were
choose
careful.
well.
Yeah.
We wanted
Yeah.
to see the cool art. We didn't go into the dark places.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just stayed away from that.
Yeah. I remember one year going to see, typically we'd want to see the man and maybe see the temple. And the one year it was a carnival. I don't remember what the theme was, but it was a carnival.
Carnival of Mirrors.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
right.
carnivals are
dark.
already creepy enough. And then you throw the Burning Man element at it.
Yeah.
And we went to see the man, but it was a maze that you had to go through. And we didn't realize we got into it and it got darker. And we'd always travel in groups also.
Yeah.
We didn't go anywhere alone. And then we realized actually this is too far, too dark. And trying to get out of there, I kind of started to panic. I was like looking, the walls were so tall. I was thinking, can I climb that? Like I wanted out so bad because it was just too far. It was too dark. So we were careful where we went. And
Right.
yeah.
Plus, I don't know, every night was different, but usually when I would only go out maybe once, maybe twice on the Playa at night, because I wanted to see the cars and like they said, the man and so on. But once I saw that, it was like, okay, well, I'm just good with chilling in our camp and sitting around and chatting with people, drinking some wine. And
Oftentimes we were so exhausted by the end of the day because we had been ministering heavily all day. And didn't want to go out. I went out once just to see the cool things and then I would stay home and rest.
I'm an old guy. I want to go to bed at 9.
Yeah. By my last couple of years, I didn't go out at night anymore. It was just, I'd had enough.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I don't think I went out the last year.
There was a couple times when a couple of our team members, their son had an art car.
Yeah.
And he would take us out. And that was different because we were all together on this car and it just felt a lot more protected. So that was fun. But
now there was one year when just down the street, not too far from us, there was a little camp that was showing these old movies. And we did venture down there and watched Princess Bride, Monty Python, the whole, it was a quotable movie. So the expectation was that you could quote it the entire movie if you wanted to, which was so fun.
That was fun.
Yeah. There were a couple camps we would find that were lighter. And there was a wine camp down the way a couple of years. And they had like cornhole and hula hoops and but that was pretty clean camp.
I think the bottom line is if you give people the freedom to do whatever they want to do without being judged, there are people who will choose wisely and people who will choose badly. So you find it all out there.
Oh yeah.
And as you guys started to get more well known and people started to realize like there's this thing going on over there, what was that like when people started to figure out kind of who you guys were? I mean, there must have been a moment where that happened.
Yeah, but I think by then they honored us, they respected us. I mean, even in the part of the early years, part of our learning curve is they would encourage us. They would go, "Oh no, don't leave early. You're part of our community." And we told them, "Listen, we're kind of done when they're going to burn the man on Saturday night, but but they did a lot to say you are part of us, you're burners. And indeed we had to embrace that and go, no, we were sent into this culture to fit in a way, but with a difference.
Yeah.
And so they honored that.
Yeah. And we definitely developed relationships with certain other camps. There was one camp in particular, Rhythm Wave. They were 5 Rhythms dance camp. And they would, what's that?
Ecstatic dance, where you just kind of move your body however you feel called. Yeah.
Yeah. They would actually send their new team members to have an encounter, and they would say, go Monday or Tuesday, first part of the week, because we weren't as busy. And so the first couple of days, it was really common for us to have rhythm waver after rhythm waver in our encounters, because they just had them all come. Or the people who'd been before, they knew, show up early in the week. It's easier to get in and get an encounter. So we would see them. And then we got to the point where we'd have a meal with them every year. So really neat relationship developed there with that camp.
We also had people that told us they would come to Burning Man in order to come to our camp.
Yes.
It was their pilgrimage to come to our camp.
Yeah.
Carl. Or people just, get so blown away, they go, I don't have to see the rest of Burning Man. They either go home or they just do what Andrea just said. They just hang out in the coffee dome all the time.
Yeah.
So they sort of adopted us.
Yeah.
And I think some of those, it seemed like there were also some that were repeaters to our camp that also began to leave early before the burning of the man, because it was getting so dark, even too dark for them. It's like, nah, we're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
I completely get that. I think of you guys as odd as this sounds, embodying the best principles of Burning Man, right? Like you took it in the right direction, rather than towards darkness and self-indulgence and what we might call spiritual materialism or material spiritualism, right? Like, oh, what I do with my body is spiritual, right? Spiritual materialism. You guys actually took it in the right direction, embodied all the same principles, but in the direction of light and goodness and beauty and virtue, and of course God. But you didn't wear God on the outside. Like there wasn't a big cross at the front. You know what I mean? It wasn't like it wasn't like a church. It was, you wore these principles in who you were and what you did, and let them speak for themselves in a way towards virtue. So it makes sense to me that people would come and experience what you have to offer and be like, yeah, I've gotten everything I need out of Burning Man, other than like, I look at the cool blinky things and then I go home, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it all goes back to that hunger inherent in so many of the people, that spirituality was there. And basically our mission was to find it, to meet it, and to redefine it, redefine it for people, or give it an interpretation if they didn't know what they were feeling.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of God. I think he likes doing that. He put the hunger there originally. He put the empty hole in the human heart that needs to be filled only with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. With that note, it's 1:10 and I have an appointment at 1:30.
Okay.
Oh,
no problem.
Yeah.
I have a couple more questions, but I mean, I can take for the rest of the three of you, and Andrea, if you have to go, by all means, or we can wrap it up now if you guys have to all go together, but it's no problem.
They can carry on.
Okay. It's lovely to see you. Thank you for,
Great to be part of this. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Oh, nice. Kim?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Said hi.
Bye, Andrea.
Yeah, so I think for me, the one part of my story, and we'll just go for just a few more minutes if that's okay. The one part of the story that I don't often talk about is how I actually
Should we move we look a little lopsided now.
Exactly. Yeah. Is actually how I came to reorganizing the frame.
All right. Anyway, we feel better now.
Perfect, more balanced, right?
The feng shui
is actually how I came to even meet the guy who directed me to your camp in the first place. So as I've mentioned other places, I was dating this woman for a number of years, and that relationship ended. And this was at the end of August 2015. And suddenly it's like, well, I'm not in this relationship anymore. I'm okay with camping in tents. She was more of an RV kind of girl. And I was like, well, now I can go. So I just decided, I felt the strong call to go to Burning Man. And so I went, and people are always selling tickets at the last minute. But the thing is, I rode with a bunch of people in with an RV, and we rode into the festival. And the thing was, no one knew that I was coming. So it's like suddenly I'm just showing up. Normally people spend a year planning what camp they're going to be with, and they contribute to camps monetarily and organizationally. I'm just showing up kind of like as an orphan, right? And so I'm in this RV full of guys. I don't even remember who's in the RV, and they don't know where to park either. Not because of me, but because they don't know where they're going, right? And so the RV, as we're driving onto the Playa, tries to stop at 3 or 4 different locations right now. And I know that I have friends, I have the coordinates where my friends' camps are all over the Playa, from 11 o'clock, on the clock face, to 5 o'clock. And I think 3 or 4 o'clock. And so trying to figure out where to park, and we end up just parking the first place they could find a spot to fit their RV, because it was like Wednesday. Right. And so by that point, the festival's kind of filling up, and finding places to park your RV closer to the center versus the rim, is really difficult. So we park in this particular spot that isn't part of anyone's camp. It's just a free space. So that meant I was closer to one camp than another one. And we drove around for like an hour and a half trying to find a place to park. And that meant I was closer to one camp than another. So I'm like, okay, I can either hitch a ride on an art car all the way to the other side of the festival to meet up with one group of friends, or I can just carry all my stuff 2 or 3 blocks to this other camp. It's like, okay, I'll just carry my stuff and see what they have. And so if the RV had parked somewhere else, and because I went there and set up when I did and put my tent right where it was, went to sleep, woke up in the morning, and then that morning is when I met the guy who directed me to your camp, because he was in the tent next to me. Like if I had arrived, if we had parked on the other side of the Playa, I never would have. I mean, who knows, right? God makes all things work, right?
Right.
But the coincidence, quote unquote, of me, of the RV struggling to find a place to park so we could park in that space so that I could be at that camp and meet that guy the morning after he had seen you guys.
Yeah.
All those pieces lining up that got me there in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, it blows my mind when I think about it.
I love that kind of hindsight, when you see the hand of God orchestrating things behind the scenes that you're completely unaware of, and the outcome. It's phenomenal. It is mind blowing.
Yeah.
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 And then, just last couple of questions. Like, are you still other than me, are you still in touch with anybody from the event, or do you ever get feedback of like, oh, I met you guys and you set my life in a whole new direction? Or
I heard from a guy that he lives in New York City. He had a radical encounter with God the year we were with him. He just was wondering if we were going, and I don't perceive, it was a slight chat, and he was getting ready to get on a plane to come here. It was like a last minute, getting ready to go to Burning Man. It was a last minute thing. So we didn't carry on a big chat, but I thought it was significant he got in touch.
Yeah. There was one man from Rhythm Wave named Rich. Actually, I was involved in an encounter with him. It was my newbie year, and come to find out it was his also. And Rob had been telling me, there'll come a moment when the penny will drop, which is that moment when it's like something in you just grafts into what's happening there, the move of God. And it was in the encounter with Rich is when it happened. And I was undone by it, and he was undone by it. He went over in the coffee dome afterwards, apparently, and was in there weeping and crying. And anyway, the next year he came back for an encounter and randomly was seated with my encounter team. And it was that moment of recognition and excitement to see each other. Well, after that, every year when he came, he would actually ask to be seated with me. And watching the process of him coming to the Lord over the years, how the encounters that he had with us were significant touch points. So he and I still keep in touch loosely. You guys ran into him randomly at a Native American event that you guys went to. Yeah. And then also there was one year where there was this young German gal that came to our camp, and she had come with her sister, and her sister was wholly embracing the Burning Man experience. And this gal was completely freaked out by the Burning Man experience and ended up coming, I think, every day for an encounter. As she hung out in the coffee dome a lot, we were a safe space for her. She and I have been communicating a little bit also, which has been really cool. So I know.
Yeah.
And there was maybe not so much now, but for a few years, there was another gal in San Francisco, and she might be in touch with some of the other team members.
Yeah.
That-
Shannon and
Yeah.
Caitlin, I think we're keeping in
So,
touch with.
yeah, I think there's some of the other team members that are in touch with some of the people they came across as well,
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah. So, it's one of the things that we've learned actually through the ministry, me learning it through the dream interpretation ministry. You guys had already had a lot of experience with that, is the whole thing of God entrusts us with this, whatever encounters in front of us, we're responsible for that. And then beyond that, it's up to God where he's going to take things. So learning to release to God the responsibility for what happens after that.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it's pretty hard sometimes to,
Yeah.
watch them walk out of our encounter tent, back out into whatever was going to happen out there. But we just, would do what we were called to do in the little time that we had with them. And then beyond that, it's up to God. And I learned so much also about the reach of God's arm. If he can direct people to our camp at Burning Man to get that significant of an encounter, he can do it anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I just one more question is I don't want to ask, but that means that I have to ask, is that I want to walk through my encounter through your eyes, because I've told the story through my eyes so many times and I think about it all the time. So like just walk through, like, this guy shows up in front of you and like 3.5 hours later, and then 5 years later. If there's anything you want to share for that please feel free.
From my perspective, as I was thinking about this, I loved how it unfolded, because I could see when you sat down, we get started, and I could feel and sense and see and feel that thing in the spirit where you're coming forward and you're sharing some stuff, and then you pull back, this back and forth, and how much can we go? And it was like almost like an onion, like we get through one thing and you go, wow, you kind of be really impacted, and then I want some more, and we would just keep going. And I remember it was a beautiful thing, and I remember, which I really highly value this, Will, because not everybody would do this. But when that point in time when you said, I forget the words that you used, but basically you were talking about your relationship with men and father figures and so on, and questioned Larry.
Yeah.
And I thought that was brilliant. I still to this day, it's like, that was so cool that you had the courage, you had the fortitude, go, no, I'm here now, and I'm not gonna bail because I'm questioning this guy's intentions or whatever.
Yeah.
And you just brought it out, and that gave Larry the opening to be able to express his heart to you. And I just thought that was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I loved how that coming forward and coming back and this whole thing and going, no, that was good. I think I can take some more. Let's go.
Yes.
Yeah. Your voraciousness came through in that encounter.
Yes.
You were actually an easy encounter in that way because of your hunger, your willingness, your openness. We definitely had encounters over the years where we were really having to try to draw people out, and you were there you were like, bring it. And the unfolding is a great way of saying it. We wouldn't know. It was kind of a weird sensation to be sitting in our seats and waiting for someone to be seated in front of us. Like, from one encounter to the next, we had no idea what was going to be seated with us. And I would always try to guess, like you were saying, you were looking and seeing which team you wanted to be with. I would try to guess, like, okay, which one are they going to seat next? And I was almost always wrong. But anyway, not knowing what was going to happen, and then to have you sit down with just your just openness and hunger. And it was an incredible faith building encounter for me, and probably for you also, just walking through the whole thing. And then when you shared that thing about seeing Jesus with the dust mask and the goggles, that was kind of one of those things that kind of like, oh, gee, like he would show up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on the Playa, full gear, so we're getting wrecked right along with you in that encounter. It was amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When I had that inspiration, was like just dropped to take you over and lead you over. It's like, yeah, take him over and lead him over and introduce him. And it was like that whole thing was like almost, as I think about it now, it's almost like in slow-mo play. I can revisit that. And it impacted me profoundly as well. As you hit the floor, you just hit the floor and coming undone there. And like I was coming undone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was a powerful, powerful moment, infused with the power of God in that moment. And you can't help but be wrecked, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a powerful moment for me as well as for you. It was I feel privileged to have that moment with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then having you come up here for Christmas. And I remember, I don't even know how many times throughout the course of the time you were here, you kept grabbing your head and saying, too much goodness, too much goodness. It was like you couldn't process what you were experiencing. But when you see somebody encountering the reality of the bigness and the love of the Father, and you see them like trying to even process, and like their physical body can't even handle what they're experiencing, it does something to you too. It's like it refreshes our own faith to see that kind of a thing. And what a joy watching your journey. And I remember you bringing up the thing about traveling, and you'd had this in your heart to do this traveling. And so Katie and I, as moms, we're like, well, why wouldn't you do it? Like blessing you to go and explore and to live this dream, not knowing it was going to be this 5-year journey into every possible spiritual experience. And Katie and I have talked about this. I had a lot of, oh God moments reading your Facebook posts. And Katie said she just had a lot of faith over the whole thing.
I had the assurance. I mean, it wasn't like I was happy you were, it's like, oh yeah, he's going to try that. It was like, no, I just had this assurance that Jesus was with you, and that he wasn't going to let you go.
Yeah.
That he was covering you somehow. He was protecting you. And it's like, I just had that faith and that assurance, even though it's like, I squirm a little bit. He's doing this. Oh, okay. Yeah. No, God's got this.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember you telling the story about, I think you might've messaged just about it. You were in, I think it was Australia. And you were in some town that was known for its new age offerings, so to speak.
Byron Bay, maybe.
Okay. You're walking down the street and there was a sign on the street, prayer, or it was something like that.
Yes. The prayer room.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you shared that story, it's like, okay, God's got it. God's got it. He's okay. Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me about that. Yeah. There was Byron Bay is like, it's like Sedona or Bali or Goa or something like that. And then I walked it. I remember there was a prayer sign. I don't remember what the denomination was or what it said, but I did go in there, and you guys were with me. Like I was messaging you regularly, on Facebook, the 4 of you, like we were chatting regularly.
Yeah.
Good.
And then all of a sudden we get this message. I've traveled the world and experienced all this and come to the realization that Jesus is the truth. It was like,
He stress tested it to the max.
I did.
I mean, my faith went through that, just watching what you'd been through and God just guiding you through it all. Really incredible.
Well, I probably haven't told you this part of the story, Rob, but this is the part that you play into is, so I met you guys on the Playa, and it was that moment with Larry that I was really stuck on. Was like, I was projecting he had some judgments towards me, and it was just strictly coming out of me, but I was like, I'm not going to be able to get past this. And so it was maybe a 10 or 15 minute period where it's like, okay, this is in my heart. I'm either going to say it or not. It's either going to stop, either I'm gonna give into it and stop and leave, or I'm gonna speak it. And so I spoke it, right? And that was a profoundly healing. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me just interject, because I just reframe that here in this again. And that was a masterful cooperation with Holy Spirit on your part, because you brought something to the light. Most people go, oh, I don't want to bring that. I don't want to bring that up. But you were honest. You just brought it to the light. You weren't vindictive or anything, didn't have an edge. You just brought it to the light. And that gave Larry that opening to say, oh no, this is my heart. Let me put you at ease. So 2 bits of light coming together, and if only we all would do that more in our daily lives, more problems would get resolved. Like, I'll give you a chance to speak now. I'm struggling with this judgment. I'm not sure if it's right or wrong. Please speak.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing, is I had to get my hands around it. But there's a picture forming, by the way, of like how I guess providential it is that was the 4 of you on the call today. And then I wish Larry could be here, but I'll send him a message when we're done. But like, but Larry had such an important role to play. All 4 of you did, but Larry's role, because I'm sitting there for 15 minutes, like struggling with this. How am I going to express this? And I'm having to separate, like, I'm having this projection moment. I'm not aware that it's a projection. Like, am I actually feeling something? And so I'm wrestling with it. Like, okay, I've got to separate myself from it and find the right way to speak it in a way that isn't confrontational, or it's like, okay, I just need to check this out real quick. Like, getting my hands around it like that to say, because I had announced that I wanted to travel and that I wanted to travel the world. And what I was experiencing was that, like, he was judging me for that. Like, oh, who's this kid to do this privileged kid or whatever, something like that. And that it was my own voice, but I couldn't hear that it was my own voice. I was projecting it onto him. And so that I had to take that out and be able to get it to the point where it's like, okay, this thing is happening. I need to check out whether it's real or not. And what I was actually scared of was him be like, yeah, it's real. It's like, I don't know if I would. That was the fear, right?
Right.
But to be able to, I'll be like, and I'll never forget the way that he said, like, no, I don't feel that way at all. I'm happy and excited for you. And I was like, really? Right. Well, the people who are listening to this podcast, they know me in a certain way now, but I was not always this guy. Like, I remember I had this dream in my heart to travel for 15 years by the time that I met you guys, almost 16 years. And I had to ask you guys for permission. I had to ask total strangers for permission to fulfill my own dreams. And you guys, I remember Barb, I think you and Katie, you guys looked at me like, you don't need to ask us for permission, but I still needed to ask.
Yeah.
Right. And and that's completely alien to the way that I am now, but that's the guy that I was back then, because I was carrying this internalized judgment that I needed to be able to get out into the space between me and Larry. And then also Barb, you and me, like the stuff that I had around mother and stuff like that, to be able to separate that. Because I remember you saying so meaningfully, like, no, it's my job as a mom to let my son go. Like, I'm not supposed to hold him here forever. Like, of course it breaks my heart. Of course it hurts to send him out in the world, but that's still what I have to do as a mother. And that was not my experience of mothering at all. And that you had my mom's name, Barbara, and that you offered that experience. That was like, what? Like, that's what a mother is, And so so you had a piece of it and Larry had a piece of it as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Will. That's that fills it out. We knew some of that, but you filled it out now even more. And thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Beautiful.
I mean, it was the space that the 3 of you created.
Yeah.
Because I was hungry for it, but while you're doing the healing work with me, I'm also testing you, because I've done so much healing stuff. We're like, do these people know what they're doing? You know what I mean? Like, oh, they know what they're doing. Okay, let's And there was a point at which the ball just starts rolling downhill. When the really deep stuff around mother and father starts coming out. That really liberated me to be like, oh, wow, you mean like I can leave the mother energy and go be myself and travel the world. And I can depart from this father energy and like, no, it's okay. And free myself. Like, that was very powerful for me, but there's no way that you guys would have known what was going on behind my eyes.
Yeah.
And just the piece that you had, Rob, is that I've got it. Excuse me, 1 second. Is right?
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
Yeah. Because when I got back from my travels, the day I got back, February 2020, the day I got back, you had shipped this to my friend Jeff, and I arrived into San Francisco to stay with him for a couple nights and pick up my stuff and move to Phoenix. The day I got back, he put this book into my hands, Simply Christian by N.T. Wright, which you had sent to me, right?
Yeah.
And so now looking back, I understand that I met Christ on the Playa through you guys, with you guys, and he sent me on this adventure to go and do all the things. Ayahuasca, the Kumbh Mela Hindu festival, Vipassana meditation, all this different new age stuff and medicines, to go experience it all and to go do all these things. And when I got back, Christ was waiting for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you sent me this,
Yeah.
Rob, as a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It was God's timing,
Mhm.
And another wrinkle to that is you'd had so much experiences, even including ours on the Playa. You needed some teaching.
Yeah.
Which is valid. Jesus sat and taught so many times in the Bible. He didn't just preach or do miracles. He taught them principles of the kingdom. And so God has that for us. And I think that was your timing. Like you were ready. Yeah, you're ready to be taught. Old Chinese proverb, when the student is ready, the teacher will come.
Mhm. But
God sent a book your way.
He sent a lot of blessings my way.
Yeah.
I'm like in tears here, just marveling that we get to enjoy and see and marvel at this transformation. You're not just your transformation, all of us, but as we're been recounting for the last hour and a half or whatever, it just is so wonderful how God works things out, because he says, my ways are not your ways, your ways are not my ways. And so hearing all of this and hearing more and more, you filling out your own story, I just can't help but fall more in love with God. He's so, I love his intricacies and his creativity and just how cool he is.
Yeah. Amen.
Want another little piece of that real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. So the cover of this book, Simply Christian. This is Cape Reinga, which is the northernmost point of New Zealand, which is a very special place to me from my travels, New Zealand and this place. So when I got back, having moved here from New Zealand,
Chills.
this book put in my hands from you, Rob, as a gift.
My arms.
Jesus paid.
I get chills. That's amazing.
There's a universal chill in the room.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. It's got
Bigger
your
than
number.
previously thought.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, we make him so small.
Yeah. Yeah.
This keeps getting bigger.
Answering again, God, do you see me?
Yeah.
Of course I do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. This has been a real blessing of a conversation after many years of blessings of friendship and fellowship with you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
It's
welcome.
been fun to
Thank
have
you.
the conversation with you and
Yeah.
relive the moments.
Yeah. Don't be a stranger. Come back up here.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Can
we'll
do.
get down there. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anytime. And I definitely have some people that I want to come visit up there in Idaho as well.
Yeah.
Do you, are there any place that you send people for more information about you or Streams Ministries or any of the things that you do online? I know that you were doing dream interpretation online for a while.
Well,
That was more a factor of COVID.
Yeah.
Most of the work we do is pretty local.
Yeah.
Spiritream Facebook page.
We do have a Facebook page where we put stuff. I mean, it's just really for like our local dream interpretation ministry that we do. Oh,
UPS.
somebody's here. UPS.
Yeah. Spiritream, North Idaho. But,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
if
so-
somebody wanted to get in touch with us, that would be the way, because we do monitor that page. So Spiritream North
Yeah.
Idaho on Facebook.
we don't mind questions.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Put kindly.
Yeah.
Protocol's everything, remember?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're everyday people. Like there's no, great magic to it in that way. It's like you're people who took on a pretty brave and pretty bold calling to go right into the hardest and pretty difficult and dark places. And that's, but that doesn't mean there's any greatness. It's just, it's the small things that compound the big things, right?
Yeah. Just the privilege of getting to be part of what God's doing.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, thank you all so much.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank
Will.
you.
Great
Thank
to see you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
We love
See
you.
you in person soon.
Yeah.
I love you guys too.
Love you.